Hey, this is Zach with Toilet and Troubles DIY, and you're watching the Webcast, the show that gives you a behind the scenes look at your favorite haunters through exclusive interviews. In this episode, we're joined by Jeff Baird, or you may know him as BairdManor. Jeff is a haunter from Lehi, Utah, who knows a thing or two about projection mapping, loves sharing his knowledge on his YouTube channel, and his decorations have even made an appearance on Good
If you
Morning
want
America.
to decorate and avoid all the cleanup, just use projection mapping like Jeff Baird in Lehi, Utah.
14 projectors for the weekend show.
He and his son created this mind-bending projection display.
Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So backstory time. What first got you into Halloween, and how did that carry over into adulthood?
So I had that. The holidays were very magical for me when I was growing up. Like I remember waking up for Christmas and looking out the window and seeing actual sled tracks on the roof with hoof prints and foot and boot prints. Hopefully Santa didn't risk too much life and limb for Christmas morning. But that was what especially my dad helped create this feeling, this atmosphere of magic, and Halloween was very much that too. And most of what I remember from getting my interest in Halloween are just the feelings that you get along with the memories. Like I remember trick-or-treating in the 80s. I was very much an 80s trick-or-treater. So if you've listened to Jerry Seinfeld's clip on what that was like, then that's what was my childhood experience. I remember in some of the neighborhoods, they'd have big barrels sitting out in the cul-de-sac with a fire and serving cider. And so to this day, the smell of that particular wood burning takes me back to Halloween night. And there was one house in the neighborhood that we would go and look at their display. Back then, people didn't do big displays, at least not in our area. But this one guy had all these cutouts of different Halloween characters with black lights shining on them so they'd really pop, and was playing Monster Mash. So by today's standards, it was very, very simple, but it was enough to draw my interest and catch my attention. Coupling that with Disneyland Haunted Mansion, no surprise there. That's where so many of us get our inspiration from. Going through that as a kid and seeing the cool effects and wondering how they did it was probably where my interest in Halloween got started. We didn't really get into haunting too much until I did a little as a teenager. Paper mache, zip lines, things like that. But so many of the effects that I wanted that I could see in Haunted Mansion just weren't available to regular folks, at least not affordably. So it wasn't probably until early 2000s when I stumbled on a group called the Rocky Mountain Haunters, and they had a little get together they do in the summer. And so we attended, I think it was their second annual gathering that they had. And that started the era of larger scale amateur haunting house and the era of animatronics and windshield wiper motors. That's kind of where we were focused at first, was the practical effects. You could get the singing Douglas firs and rip all the branches off and then hack it and put it into some animatronic. Or during that time, Walmart had the 5-foot tall Santas and skeletons, and you could strip those down, hack them, change them to be whatever you wanted to. And so we've been doing that for about 20 years. And then more recently is where we started getting into the digital side.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, it sounds like you had a really incredible childhood and you had a dad that really cared about making it special for you, which is incredible. So you've been doing this for roughly 20 plus years now at this point?
Yeah, as an amateur haunter.
Awesome.
20 years.
Okay, good deal. So I'm a big fan of your YouTube channel, Baird Manor. I think that you've shared a lot of awesome content over the past year since you started it. If you take a look at your channel, it's really clear to see that you're like all in on projection mapping. So how did you first get into it, and what is the best and worst part of that process for you?
So there was a couple OGs in the projection mapping community here in Utah, Dave Bates and Matt Champney, if you look at their channels. So they were doing projection mapping before it was cool and before people knew it was a thing. And so they were in our little haunting community, and I remember seeing their houses, and that was really inspiring. But there was a couple barriers to entry into it at the time that might resonate with a lot of people right now too. It was expensive to get a good projector that would be bright enough for your entire house. And then the skill level required to actually put it on your house and map it to your house. I have a computer science background, so it's something I could have learned, but I wasn't sure I wanted to take that plunge. And so these guys were the inspiration for that to begin with. It wasn't until 2020 when, well, I dabbled with the digital directions a little bit. I had a bunch of cheap projectors. In fact, I think I had about a dozen small projectors with small projected scenes that we dabbled with to kind of stick our toe in the water. And then when 2020 came along, we were all in shutdown mode. We were all sitting around being bored. And I was thinking, how cool would something like that be for people? We weren't sure if we're going to be able to trick or treat or if that was even going to be an option. So something that people could drive by safely and still enjoy Halloween is maybe an alternative to what they're wanting to do. The barrier to the cost was still there and the skill level, but I had an ace up my sleeve now. My nephew had been growing up doing lots of video editing, photography, making movies and effects, and he had a educational license to Adobe After Effects. And so he's like, I think I could figure it out. And so I put down the money. I got the projector. We started with like a refurb, so it wasn't too much to feel it out a little. And then he started building out the show, and his first attempt at doing it it knocked it out of the park. That's the main show you see for BairdManor 2020. That was his in After Effects.
Awesome. So your nephew kind of helped you get into it to some degree. And that made it a little bit easier for you. What would you say is or has been the worst part of the process for you, or the thing you least enjoy?
It can be difficult to find the effects that you want. Probably most of the time is just trying to find what you have in mind. You can picture it up here. You're limited only by your imagination, right? And you have these master plans of what it'll look like, but then finding the assets, finding the pictures and the videos, and that can be the difficult part. So you find it from different places. There's some paid assets, there's some free ones that you can find, but that can be a challenge. The pro, though, is that you're only limited by your imagination and your skill level to create this thing that you're trying to imagine. And that's what's been really exciting. The practical effects that we do with the animatronics, they break half the time on Halloween night. They take up lots of storage in my garage. And they were limited by the technology that we had. I used mostly windshield wiper motors and things like that. Mm-hmm. But with digital, you can do almost anything.
Yep. Right. Awesome. Well, if someone's never attempted projection mapping but really wanted to get into it, what advice would you say, or what would you say is the simplest way to do so, and what would you say is the most cost effective?
And this is the question I've been trying to answer on my YouTube channel, so I'll see if there's a somewhat succinct version of this answer. But one thing I've noticed with projection mapping is a curve that's similar to what we see in a lot of technology. Lots of technology will go through this curve of adoption, where initially when it first comes out, it can be very expensive, and it usually requires high-level skill to do it. If you think about the internet back in the 90s, yes, I'm that old. The people that were using the internet were just the nerds. But eventually, the technology caught up to where it was more available and easy to use, so that even grandma can do it. And I suspect that projection mapping is going to take that same type of curve. And so that's encouraging for someone that's trying to get into it, because I think a lot of people see the same thing I did. The high cost, high skill level involved. I think that down the road, it's going to get more available and easier to do, more cost friendly. And you see a couple players coming on the scene right now, like Lexido and Lightform, that are trying to close that gap and trying to make it easier for people. So to get into it now, the simplest way to get into it now, there's a couple different paths. The one I did was starting with small projectors. They're like $50 or less, and a single scene. Something like the Atmos Effects Jack-o'-lantern Jamboree is a great one that everybody loves, and it's really easy to do and very cost effective. If you have a little bit more budget, you can get something like the Lexido, where it's all in one, and the software is really easy and intuitive to use. You can also outsource it. So HauntWorks does custom shows if you don't want to do the skill part, or digital press work. And so there's a lot of different avenues right now, because we're right at the beginning of this adoption curve that I described. So it's an exciting time to be in it. Lots of opportunities, and hopefully it's going to get easier and more cost effective.
Yeah, definitely. All right, awesome. A lot of your videos show your three boys either helping or interacting with your decorating. What does it mean to you to be able to get them involved in your holiday decorations?
Yeah, how cool is that? To have little little guys that are involved in your hobbies.
Mhm.
I have way too many hobbies, and they haven't caught on to all of them, but this is one that they're all in.
That's awesome.
And we raised them with the haunt. So like I said, we've been doing this about 20 years, and my oldest is just a teenager. So they literally were raised with their tradition being Halloween night, we're doing this big haunt. And so it's been great. It's been something that we can have shared experiences, and hopefully they'll be able to carry those memories just like I had with my own dad, that they'll be able to carry that on as they grow into adulthood. So it's been great.
Yeah, that's incredible. So do you have an all-time favorite memory that you've been able to create with them around Halloween so far? I think mine definitely has to be seeing them get the signed Candleman picture from Raleigh Crump.
Yeah, that was a great one, because they like me, love Haunted Mansion, and they just devour YouTube content about it. And so Raleigh Crump's one of the main heroes that they have. So getting that signed was amazing, and trying to build something. We're trying to build Raleigh Crump's Candleman, which is something that was a concept that never actually got implemented at Disneyland. And so it's been exciting for them to create a forum. And we've been in some correspondence with them to try to show him our progress, and hopefully he can appreciate that we're trying to make his concepts become a reality. The other memory I have is probably when the Baird Manor show first displayed on our house, because my nephew did kind of play his cards close to his chest. He'd give us little snippets here, but like any good filmmaker, he was building up the suspense. And so the first time I saw it completely was on my own house. And we were all there, all the kids were there, and everybody was just kind of gaping and staring in awe, because it's even better in real life, obviously.
That's a very Griswold moment.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, that's awesome. So yeah, let's dive into Haunted Mansion a little bit more. So, obviously big fan. It has inspired a lot of your own decorations. What would you say is your favorite room inside of the ride?
Well, it's so tough to narrow down. The Hatbox Ghost is my favorite character, so he's kind of slightly outside of the attic. but I also love the scenes that have a lot going on. Like I hope next time I'm on the ride, it'll break down on either the ballroom or the graveyard, because it goes by so quickly. I'd love to just get stuck there for a little while and just absorb it and just enjoy the ambiance. So it's probably a tie between the ballroom and the graveyard.
Yeah, I agree. I would love to get broken down inside of the ride in the ballroom scene and just look around and see what's going on with the Pepper's Ghost effect. And yeah, just try to see how it was accomplished inside of the ride. That'd be really awesome. All right, sweet. So let's talk about HauntWorks. It's a website for custom digital effects that you've helped create with your family, mainly your nephew, Alan. That's clearly inspired by, again, the Haunted Mansion. What's it been like to help create your own custom digital effects that are designed specifically for you to use on Baird Manor?
It's great, because as I mentioned before, that's one of the difficult things, is to find the effects that you want. And so with HauntWorks, it allowed us to kind of solve two problems out there. One is those that do want to get into projection mapping, but maybe don't want to take on the skill and the learning curve, then we can provide that service. And then the HauntWorks is trying to fill that other need of finding the effects. And it's been a balance on ours too, because we don't want it to be just straight up Disneyland. We don't want it to just be copies of that for a lot of obvious reasons. So we also want to have a little bit of our own Baird Manor branding, but obviously heavily influenced. And so this is again highlighting what's great about digital decorating, is you can have that flexibility. We create a lot of these effects just because they're what we want in our show, and then as we get people wanting them as well, then that's what led us to putting up the website, because we're getting requests like, hey, I want to get the dueling portraits, or I want to have the caretaker guy with the lantern up in the window. And so it's solving a need for ourselves, and then as we're solving our own need, then hopefully we're benefiting the haunting community too.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Y'all have some great effects up on HauntWorks' website. Which one is your favorite?
I like the caretaker a lot, probably because it's similar to the Hatbox Ghost. Second would be the dueling portraits, and you can see some behind the scenes on that on our channel. Most of our effects are not animated, it's green screen with actual actors, and so that was actually me and my old man, the guy that made the holidays magical for me. Him and I are the dueling portraits that shoot at each other.
That's an incredible full circle moment right there. That is awesome. All right, so obviously Halloween's a super busy time for us makers. So between like working on your physical props and your own walkthrough haunt, projection mapping both sides of your house, helping make digital effects, putting up videos on YouTube, having a day job, and being a husband and a dad to 3 boys, how do you balance everything?
Not well. I honestly don't do a good job balancing it. One of my weaknesses is spreading too thin. I'll have too many hobbies, and then within a hobby, it spawns all these other little sub hobbies and tasks. So I don't do a good job at managing it, really. There's things that inevitably fall by the wayside. There's some tender loving care for my YouTube channel, for example, that I need to do. We do too often just shoot one take and then I just upload it without any editing, without any graphics. And so that's one of the things that falls by the wayside. I also haven't been able to do as much projection mapping as I wanted to this year because we're building out some of the physical and practical props in the backyard. And so things always fall by the wayside. I do try to find areas where I can overlap where possible. And being a dad, that one we were able to knock out of the park, where I can just spend time with them and work on all the haunting projects.
Yeah, you definitely pull in a double duty on that one. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, by the time Halloween is over, my wife is ready to kick me out of the house.
Right?
So I definitely understand where you're coming from. All right, we're going to do some rapid fire questions. So Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars, hashtag Filoni.
Awesome. Mike Myers or Jason Voorhees?
Mike Myers.
Would you rather be a vampire or a werewolf?
Werewolf.
Digital decorations or pneumatic props?
Digital.
Candy corn or literally anything pumpkin spice?
I like candy corn. I'm one of those.
Nice. And lastly, most underrated Halloween candy?
This is a tough one because I'm on a little bit of a rant with my boys. Almost all the candy now is the same types of candy from the same types of company. There was a lot more choices when I was a kid. And so the ones I like that are underrated are the ones that are hard to find. Sixlets or Smarties. Smarties get hate on quite a bit, but I liked having that variety when I was trick-or-treating.
Yep, awesome. All right, sweet. So switching gears a little bit, who would you say is your favorite maker and how have they inspired your own decorating?
That is a really difficult question too, over 20 years. I'd be worried about leaving people out. There were many in that Rocky Mountain Haunters group on that very first gathering that we went to probably close to 20 years ago that were a huge inspiration to me. More recently, though, would be probably Dave Bates and Matt Champney, because of them paving the way to do projection mapping and showing that this was something we could do for our haunting. It's really cool. So I think those are the top of my list now, because it's fresh in my memory and it's because that's where our focus is right now.
Yeah, awesome. Being in New Orleans, we don't really have a specific like haunter community. What has that been like to be a part of Rocky Mountain Haunters and be surrounded by a whole community of makers?
Oh, it's been awesome. And it's evolved over the years. At first it was very small. There was maybe 20 people at the gathering, and that had pros and cons. It was a lot more intimate. We'd do gatherings every couple of months, and someone who would lead a project where we could all build something together. And now it's grown into a bigger Facebook community, and there's more people in Utah that are joining every day. And the pros of that is you're just getting even more input. You're getting more ideas. Haunters just thrive on ideas. And so this is creating a great boiling pot of support. And we're even trying to help each other out with trying to get some of those Home Depot items that are hot this year.
Those are hard to come by. Wow, I was not expecting that to happen. They, released the 12-foot tall skeleton the day before it was supposed to come out, and then it was already gone in minutes. That's crazy.
Orange Friday.
Yeah, I will say I did not personally expect that to happen when I first heard about the 12-foot skeleton, but it's grown such a huge cult following. It's been pretty incredible to see. Yeah. Again, you and your family have been decorating for Halloween for quite a few years now. We're talking 20 plus. What are some lessons you've learned and some of the trends you've seen over the years?
A good lesson for me that I still haven't learned, but it's still a good lesson, is to expect and accept failure as part of the process.
Yeah, that's actually been a hot button issue amongst the maker community right now.
hmm It's a little intimidating. I'll get some anxiety when I start a new project, especially when I get past those points of no return. Like, oh, I'm going to ruin this. But every day I'm trying to accept that, and every time there is a failure, I mean, this is like one of those motivational posters, I guess. But it's true that we can learn from those mistakes, and over time we just get better and better with it. And Halloween's forgiving. It can look tacky, it can look imperfect, and have it still be pretty darn awesome.
Yep, exactly. And I was just listening to the Maker's Method podcast, and they were talking about how if you go back and watch the original Star Wars, you can see just like tape holding things together on the stormtroopers' costumes and those kind of things made into the movie. But you never really would know unless you went back and watched it multiple times to see those small errors. But to your point, Halloween doesn't have to be perfect. We're not making things that have to come within an eighth of, or 16th or a 32nd of an inch just to look good.
hmm
Yeah, thankfully Halloween is super forgiving, and making props definitely can be, because it's usually dark and people aren't paying that close attention. It just looks awesome to them.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Are there any trends that you've seen over the years? I know like in the 80s, it was all about pneumatic props and that really taking off. And now we're seeing, more and more projection mapping through digital decorating. Are there any additional trends that you've seen between then and now? And kind of like, where do you see decorating in the future?
Okay, yeah. The pneumatics is definitely part of it. I never got into pneumatics a whole lot. And then there was the animatronic phase that I described. It started with us rummaging for windshield wiper motors at junkyards until eventually you get websites popping up like Monster Cats where you could actually buy them. And so that was a big trend. And there was a lot more physical animatronics. I should rephrase it. It was easier to find physical animatronics in places like Walmart there for a period. And they're arguably a little bit better than some of the stuff we're seeing now at some of the stores. They seem a little cheaper, and they're more difficult to hack. Back then, they all had the aux input, so you could just plug in your own audio and you're ready to roll.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a trend. The digital one's obvious, with people using projection and digital effects and projection mapping. I think it's going to get easier and easier to do the projection mapping, as I mentioned earlier. Another trend, like oftentimes you'll see Disney at the forefront of these things. They were doing animatronics first before the rest of us could catch up, and they've been doing amazing projection mapping on their castles. So it's interesting to see what they're going to do, to see what's coming. And obviously the projection map is getting better, but I'm also noticing things like a more seamless combination of the practical and the digital.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't been on the ride since they did the refurbishment, but the Snow White and the ride at Disneyland is a good example of this. They have a digital backdrop with physical props like trees, but then maybe you'll have a physical branch that transitions into the digital. And so blending the physical and the digital, I think is something they're trying to nail down, and is a trend we're going to start to see. And then try to make that as seamless as possible. So with the overarching goal of making it an illusion, making it seem real. Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping that's just going to get more and more realistic too as time goes by. When we first did Pepper's Ghost, for example, nobody knew what it was. Nobody knew how it worked. But that's becoming more popular as the technology improves. We went to this drone light show where they have a little bitty drones flying around in the sky and making shapes. I see Disney doing that sometime soon. And then maybe eventually we can do our own huge hat box ghost face above our house and drones.
Yeah, one can dream. Awesome. Well, sweet. Well, what are you working on this Halloween?
So this year, a lot of our focus is on the backyard. So a little bit about our haunt. We have the front main show, which is showing the Baird Manor in various stages. And then on the weekends, we do a walkthrough haunt through the backyard where you can have a chance to walk through the manor. And so that starts by going through the fence into the backyard. And last year, because we were throwing it together and we weren't sure if we were even going to get anybody being able to walk through because of COVID, we just had PVC and foam walls for an inside portion of Baird Manor. And the wind knocked it down like 2 or 3 times. So it was not very stable. This year, one of our big projects is to build out some theater flats to make some physical walls. And we actually have 2 rooms, so that we'll be able to walk through 2 rooms. with changing portraits. We have an organist. We have some other cool digital effects in there. And so they walk through a portion of the manor and then walk out of the manor into the backyard, which has the graveyard, a giant pumpkin patch, and that has more digital effects mixed with the practical. Then they'll journey through a spooky forest. And while they're going through the backyard, we have the projection mapping on the back of the house. We're deliberately not doing a big fancy show because we don't want to draw too much attention to it. It's meant to be a backdrop ambiance type of scene. So we have that on the house, and that helps with the illusion too, because it's like 360 around the house. The house looks haunted. Whether you're looking at it from the front or you're looking at it from the back, it looks like it's the house itself, and that adds to the illusion. Then the last part that we're excited about is going through the crypt, where you get to see Raleigh Crump's Candleman. And I really hope, this is one of those scary potential failure moments. I really hope it can work out like I'm picturing in my head. We have a physical Candleman about as tall as I am that we're going to projection map some effects on to make it look like the wax is melting, and we'll have flames in his eyes and on the candles. And so I'm hoping that one will be a success, not a failure.
Yeah. Well, you've got your hands full. I've seen the behind the scenes walkthrough with what you have so far, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that come to fruition for you. So yeah, I'm sure all of your hard work's going to pay off.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. All right. So where can everyone find you on the internet if they want to find HauntWorks or see the digital effects that you have available? Where can they go for that?
So HauntWorks is at haunt.works. And we don't have the .com, so that's important to do, haunt.works, or you get to a different website. And then BairdManor you can find on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok with the keyword of BairdManor. And we'd love a subscription and a follow on YouTube. That helps us to grow the channel and be able to provide more content. And I think I mentioned too that one of our goals with the channel is to try to close that gap for people so they can do more digital decorating themselves and have it not be so daunting.
Yeah, awesome. Well, very cool. Well, thanks for joining us, Jeff. Really appreciate your time, and we will talk again soon.
Thank you.